This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
He's just one of the all-time greats. Let's talk a little bit about, when his role starts to change. When you're first coming into the company, he's no longer actively managing. He's doing on-camera stuff as a commentator. And fast forward a little bit, he's not there very long before he winds up in WCW. Did you ever imagine there would be a time or day where he wouldn't be a part of the World Wrestling Federation?
I really didn't. And same goes for Gene. I thought that Gene and Bobby were lifers in WWE, WWF at the time. And I never envisioned them leaving. They were so good at what they did. I mean, there was not a better color analyst on TV, in my opinion, than Bobby Heenan. He motivated you to watch and to listen. And because you didn't want to miss anything. I go back, one of my favorite shows, and you and I chatted about this time or two, is The Sopranos.
Yeah.
I got every episode of The Sopranos on my iPad. So when I'm flying, or I need to entertain myself with something, I start watching Soprano episodes. And I go back and listen to them, watch them, and I hear things on there that I missed the first time around.
Yep.
Because it's so much great dialogue. And again, this comes at you rapid fire. So sometimes I didn't get to process when I heard it the first time. I go back and hear it again and again, and I hear things in the dialogue that I missed. So you didn't want to do that with Bobby because invariably you're going to be laughing at something he said, and he doesn't really let you up.
Right.
Because then you miss another line that you just can't live without, so to speak. So that's the thing about that. Bobby was I just thought he was a staple. But look, things change. I'm sure some people would say, well, I never thought Hulk Hogan would leave WWF. I didn't, but he did. Things change. But Bobby leaving was something. Look, here's a guy, again, we talked about, dropped out of school to feed his mom and his grandma in the 8th grade. A guy that got into wrestling business because he wouldn't take no for an answer. He endured $5 payoffs. And then finally, after a while, maybe this speaks to how good he was. Bobby Heenan was the first manager booked by Sam Muchnick in St. Louis.
Wow.
St. Louis was a very structured, sports-like environment, and the matches were everything. They had good TV. With a lot of great talents, like, Larry Matizak was a great friend, and what a wonderful guy, was broadcasting there, among other guys. Joe Garagiola was on the broadcast team there, the old baseball guy. So Bobby was just so good that Muchnick saw that he was able to take a heel. If Sam had a heel I'll give you an example. Black Jack Lanza, one of my favorite guys. Jack is a great conversationalist. He's a very intelligent guy. He taught school for a long time before he got into pro wrestling, but he had a big frame. He was educated. He started working in the office for Vern, keeping track of things, staying organized, like a lot of school teachers are trained to do. But Jack was not the greatest. He wasn't like Mulligan. The Black Jacks were Mulligan and Lanza. But Mulligan was the charismatic one of the duo. But Lanza could certainly hold his own and more in the ring.
Right.
Great ring general, Conrad, but he wasn't strong in a promo. So guys like that Sam liked to book because they're reliable, they're hardworking, they always give you great effort. Sam loved those guys, and why not? But they needed to be able to verbalize as the time moved on, where verbalization and selling tickets became an art form. And nobody was better at drawing heat or selling tickets or focusing on an event or a match than Bobby Heenan. So Bobby became the first manager ever booked by Sam Muchnick. And looking back at Mr. Muchnick's career and his legacy, that speaks volumes when you stop and think about it.
No doubt. I wonder in hindsight, you've told us that Bobby was pretty gracious with you and a lot of other guys maybe weren't in the WWF, but I mean, you come in March of 93, and by the end of the year, he's gone. I mean, we've talked about how much you enjoyed working with him and how much time you spent with him. And realistically, you're with him a handful of months and then it's up. His contract's coming due at the end of the year. And you got to wonder in hindsight, did Vince have that in his mind's eye when he hired you? Like, I know you've said before, well, I was probably brought in to replace Gorilla because Gorilla had some health issues and was probably wanting to slow down a little bit, but he doesn't renew Bobby either just a few months later. Do you think that was more based on, finances or him just ready to move on and have a new face, him being Vince?
Well, Vince knew, first of all, my role and Bobby's role were entirely different. Entirely different. He was playing quarterback and I was playing safety.
Right.
We're on the same team, but we didn't play in the same position. We weren't competing for the same job, et cetera, et cetera. Vince knew the same thing with Gene. When Gene's contract was coming up, I remember Vince talking to me about that. He said, just so you'll know, because it affected the broadcast side, which is where I was focused on at the time. I'm not gonna renew Okerlund, but he doesn't know it. Mm. And he said, but I'm going to help him get a lot of money. He said, and I said, okay, how are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to let the other guy steal him. His contract's going to lapse. He's going to be able to go wherever he wants. And I know that if meaning WCW, think that they're stealing one of my primary faces and voices, then they'll pay him a lot more money than I'm going to be able to pay him here. And it'll be a great payday for Gene doing the same job.
Right.
And so that was kind of how that worked out. I don't know that was the same case with Bobby, but Bobby was getting increasingly more challenging to work with for some people in the company. Not me. When the light came on, he never phoned shit in. He was always on top of his game. That's why even though we were only together for a few short months, they were as memorable a few short months as I've had in my entire career, and it's a long career. Knock on wood as I am. Hopefully it goes on another few years, hopefully. But nonetheless, it seems like we worked together forever because it was that good. But I don't know that. I think did Okerlund leave before Gene or before Bobby?
Yeah,
we know that
they're both going to leave around the same time. And it just feels like it's the end of an era. I think it's been written that Bobby's contract is up in 93 and Vince does offer him a new contract. But then a week later, he tells Bobby he couldn't honor that contract and needed him to take a 50% pay cut. And Bobby said he wasn't able to do that. And he was tired of going to New York, tired of crowds, tired of the travel, tired of people. So he decides it's time to go. And the December 3rd, 1993 Raw from White Plains, New York is Bobby's last Raw. And Bobby wrote that at the production meeting earlier that day, Vince asked him, how did he want to leave? And Bobby said, have Gorilla throw me out. And he was going through his bags and finding stolen towels and light bulbs and ashtrays and phone books and everything from a hotel, because that's what the Brain would do. And Pat Patterson allegedly asked, why don't you have bra and panties in there too? And Bobby replied, well, Pat, I think when we travel, you and I might pack differently, which is just great stuff. During the show, Gorilla comes out while Bobby's doing commentary. He grabs Bobby, walks backstage with his bag, throws him out of the arena. And then he gives his farewell and walks around to the back, and Gorilla is waiting for him in the car. And they drove to the LaGuardia Holiday Inn, and it's just an emotional moment that they share at the hotel. And when Bobby gets to his room, he has a big basket of bananas in there. So he calls Gorilla and says, I have some bananas in here. Do you want them? And they come down and hug and share a basket of bananas. And it really is like a divorce almost, but You know, it's a sad thing. These were two very best friends, and now their historic run is over. And we know that Bobby's going to wind up on WCW, and it's a sad thing, man. I never imagined I'd see Bobby leave the WWF. This feels like his home.
You're right, and I agree wholeheartedly. It still to me feels like his home. His greatest accomplishments were in WWE,
Right.
Without a doubt. I think we could all agree on that. And that's not knocking WCW. Just he was used in a different way. He was the number one manager in the number one wrestling company in the world, and unlike today, even though I know here in AEW we're trying to. Tony Khan is trying to, reinvigorate the character of managers with Tully there and Arn there and so forth. All these guys that we're using, Vicky Guerrero's there. It's just, he's trying to regenerate that role.
Right.
We know that there was a time that the managers kind of fell out of fashion. And they still are in some areas. Does WWE have a dominant manager right now?
Well, you could argue Paul Heyman with the new Roman Reigns thing, but we'll wait and see.
Yeah, but Paul is probably the exception.
Right.
It's a short list, I guess is my point.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not forgetting Paul Heyman's abilities whatsoever. And that was a good move for those guys, I think. But nonetheless, the manager thing was kind of out of vogue. And the other thing we haven't talked enough about, we kind of glossed over, I did, that Bobby had a terrible neck injury.
Right.
He was in a lot of pain often, hence his drinking. It kind of numbed the senses, and he was, his drinking never affected his work because he didn't drink on the job that I'm aware of. He didn't with me anyway. I'll put it that way. Because most of our voiceover started in the morning. Then we had that great lunch break with the food that we liked. And then the team, the production team loved the food, and they loved the fact they didn't have to stay there all day. Because sometimes, again, on those Tuesdays, because of the incessant amount of phone calls, the fact that Vince is multitasking, the voiceovers could go till in the evening,
right,
all day. And so these guys knew that when they were working with Heenan and I, that Heenan and me, that they would get, they're going to get home for supper. They're going to see their family. And that counted for something. So, Bobby was the WWE will always be the home of the brain to me. But I was almost as, when they took him, when he was unbooked as a manager, and made strictly as a broadcaster, to me, that was another end of an era. Because up until that point, there was no manager ever in wrestling, and I would argue since, that was better than Bobby Heenan. So you lose a key guy in that role, and quite frankly, Bobby Heenan's presence as a manager in WWE was never replicated. And that, if you think about that, all these years later, all the guys that were managers and for various reasons, Mr. Fuji was with Yoko because he helped Yoko travel and all these things. It was just, there just wasn't anybody that ever replaced him. So then when he left the broadcast booth, to me, his voice was synonymous with big events in the WWF, WWE, whatever you want to say. So I was really shocked that he left, and I was shocked that but after Gene got his deal, and Gene got a very favorable financial package from WCW, which is great.
By the way, let me add some context to that. You asked earlier, Gene's going to wind up leaving in September of 93, and he shows up on WCW in November of 93. 1 month later, Bobby finishes up with the WWF in December of 93, and he shows up on WCW programming in January of 94. So those guys weren't without a payday very long.
No, and they weren't. And I will say that because Gene and Bobby had their roots going all the way back to working together when they were younger guys for Vern Gagne in the AWA, they talked a lot.
Right.
They both lived in Florida. They'd known each other forever and a day. And so you can't tell, nobody can convince me that Gene's deal and I'm sure Gene's old school enough not to reveal his entire financial package, but I'm sure he gave Heenan a pretty good indication of the kind of money that might be there for him, and it was more money than he was going to be able to get as a broadcaster only in WWF in that era. So I think that probably had an influence. Gene's deal probably had an influence on Bobby making the decision to leave and go there. And again, he would be, like you said, which is right, he hated the New York City airports. And he was so recognizable. And sometimes he didn't want to be bothered. And I understand, well, that's part of your job. That's what you're paid to do. Well, it is, but fans sometimes don't understand their boundaries. So, and I'll give you the example of that. You know, I've been asked for autographs standing at a urinal.
Oh.
And I'd say, well, I can't sign it. My hands are full. Which is another blatant lie, but nonetheless, the boundaries. And Bobby was getting less patient and more than he was when he was younger, and he's more clearly defining his boundaries. And going through the New York City airports, or going through from New York over to Connecticut. And look, Stamford's a nice town, but it's not exactly a garden spot. It's a very industrial-oriented town, a working city, which is cool, but it sure as hell wasn't like Florida.
Right.
It wasn't like Bobby had, because Jan and I visited Bobby and Cindy on more than one occasion during that time that we were together, and then even after. And, I remember he had the big, the screened-in pool to ward off the bugs and all that stuff. I remember that very vividly. They had a beautiful home that Cindy had designed, and it was exactly what you would think a home in Florida would be. A lot of white, a lot of bright colors, happy stuff. And so Bobby wasn't going to leave that situation, and the travel was a little bit better. And then the bottom line, going back to the old school, the money was better. And I think the money was the deciding factor in him leaving McMahon and going to work for WCW.
Let's talk.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.